Hello everyone. This lecture is based on chapter 7 of Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow. It's a chapter entitled Jumping to Conclusions. But I'd like to focus on one of the biggest and most important ways we jump to conclusions, which is called confirmation bias. So confirmation bias is probably one of the most pervasive, well-known, and most distorting of our cognitive biases in terms of thwarting our effort to have true beliefs about the world. Way back in the 16th century, Sir Francis Bacon observed that humans tend to do this thing called to confirm their biases. So he says this: the human understanding, whether it has once adopted an opinion, either as being the received opinion or as being agreeable to itself, draws all things else to support and agree with it. So in other words, once humans have an opinion, whether that opinion is, what common sense or what everyone else believes, or whether it's your own particular beliefs or views, what you do is you walk around the world and you view the world through this filter and you draw all the evidence and all the things that would support that view, and just look at the things that support your position. So you draw all things else to support and agree with what you say. So you maybe disregard the things that don't fit. You just pay attention to the things that do seem to fit with what you already believe. And you could see already how this would distort our quest to have true beliefs about the world. If we start out with our conclusion and just look for evidence that supports it, that is not a good way to find to get true beliefs. There's the pictures of some cherries down here because another way to think of confirmation bias is cherry picking. So you just pick the information that you like and you leave the evidence there that you don't like. The scary thing about this is we do not notice when we are doing it. Our mind is blind to when we are selectively interpreting the world. So we're blind to this tendency. Learning about it can help. Kahneman is a little skeptical about whether we ever can totally break free of confirmation bias, but I think that we can make progress and at least come to put some correctives in there for ourselves to make sure that we are not having all our beliefs contaminated by confirmation bias. Okay, so on my on the homepage of the homepage on our website, our class website, I have this cognitive bias codex. I did not draw it, but it has a list of all the different types of cognitive biases. Some of these I've never heard of, and also there are some maybe big ones that they don't include, that I don't see on here. So it's not all encompassing, but so this is the area of the map that has to do with confirmation bias. So there are many types of confirmation bias. They're kind of like synonyms. So like congruence bias, subjective validation, experimenter's bias. Those are all so similar to confirmation bias. Kind of like synonyms, like house and home. You've heard this one. They have slightly different meanings, slightly different feel to them, but they basically mean the same thing. So that's how these are. So yeah, so if you've heard of hindsight bias, do I even see hindsight bias here? Ooh, I don't see it. Okay, so hindsight bias would be an example of a type of confirmation bias that you may have heard of, which is something happened and then you think to yourself, I knew it all along. Okay, so here's some definitions of confirmation bias, or different ways to kind of parse out what confirmation bias is. It's cherry picking, which is the tendency to look for evidence that confirms a favored hypothesis or belief, while neglecting or ignoring evidence that would disprove it. So this is why scientists use the scientific method. They use this scientific method to correct for the human tendency to only look for information that confirms what they already believe, confirms their hypothesis. So scientists have intentionally built in a method for checking these biases in human thinking. We may do a bias search. So whether this is a search on the internet, in the library, in your memory, asking your friends, asking people for advice, your search is biased. So you go through a distorted process of information gathering. You have something you want to believe, and the belief directs the search for evidence instead of looking at all the evidence and drawing a conclusion based on that. Or another way to look at it, you have a certain belief, and instead of looking for evidence that would disprove the belief, if your belief was false, you only look for evidence that supports your belief. So just look out for what you type into Google. You know, why astrology works, right? That is a biased search, because you're presupposing that astrology already works when you're typing that into the search bar. Okay, biased memory. I see this a lot. Some topic will come up in a social gathering about, let's just say, you hear this a lot, men are jerks. Sorry, guys out there. I don't actually believe that, but it's a good example. And then the people at the party go back to their memories and they're like, yeah, men are jerks. And they think of all the examples in the past when men are jerks. That would be examples that fit their view that men are jerks. But what are they not looking for? They're not remembering all the nice non-jerk men. You know, the grandpa at the park who helped your kid, and your 6th grade teacher, and your youngest brother. Those would be counterexamples. And then there's a biased interpretation. So often evidence can be ambiguous. For example, let's see. Suppose you think, I don't know, people don't like you. And you walk into a classroom and you interpret the things people are doing in the room as not liking you. Whereas if you had a different starting point, you wouldn't interpret the behavior of the people in the classroom as not liking you. These come from my colleague at Sacramento State University, who kind of inspired me to teach critical thinking in the way that I do. So he gives a lot of these examples, except for not this one. It's so weird how famous people seem to die in groups of 3. That is a confirmation bias belief. I had never heard of the movie The Goonies until you told me about it. Now I'm seeing it everywhere. This is his example. Hollywood actors are short. Tom Cruise is 5'7". So in this one, you say, oh, Hollywood actors are short. And then everyone sitting around the table thinks of examples that support this belief. They don't think of the counterexamples like Ben Diesel and Tim Robbins and I don't know who else is talking. Okay. Here's one. My dreams are prophetic. I dreamed that something horrible was going to happen to my sister the night before she had a car wreck. So I know people that say that they have dreams that tell the future. This is confirmation bias because you don't remember all the dreams you had that nothing happened, that didn't come true. You only remember the one time out of the 10,000 dreams you've had in your life that you dreamed something and then something similar happened. So that's why this is a sort of cherry picking. You don't think of the times it didn't happen. Oh yeah, this was, my doctor said this. She said, I can predict when my patients are going into labor. When I wake up in the night and think about my patient, I get a call right after that. And then I went home and thought about it, and I thought, well, my doctor is doing something very similar. It's confirmation bias. She's doing what this my dreams are prophetic thing is. She only has a certain number of patients who are in that window of giving birth. When she's has these number of patients that are in this window of giving birth, she's going to be thinking about them when they go into the she's going to be thinking about them at night. And here's the confirmation bias part. When she thinks of a patient and doesn't get a call, she doesn't remember that. She only remembers her thinking of a patient and getting the call, because that's the memorable example. Okay, and if you're not getting, we're going to go into more detail on some of these examples coming up. Yeah, this is in the Cognitive Bias Codex called Post-Purchase Rationalization. After I bought my car, I looked at some reviews online. I looked at some positive reviews online, and I'm glad I got it. Here's one. Don't say anything or you will jinx it. So some people, me included, don't rationally believe in jinxes, but as we'll see in a second, you'll say something and people say, don't say anything, you're going to jinx it. And that's also an example of confirmation bias. I'll explain that in a second. And then any sort of stereotype, whether based on sex or race or ethnicity or, I don't know, club affiliation, those stereotypes are fed by confirmation bias, because you are looking for, you have a certain belief that this group acts like this, and then you remember and you see the examples of people in that group acting in that stereotypical way. Okay, so here's an example of this last one of stereotypes being fed by confirmation bias. Okay, and this is the stereotype that women are bad drivers. And he says, dude, I'm telling you, women are bad drivers. This is not a woman, though. That's Mr. Bean. Anyway, so you're out driving in your car. You believe women are bad drivers. What do you notice? First of all, you don't notice good drivers. You don't say, oh, wow, look how good look at that person staying in their lane and going the speed limit and not swerving. You just ignore good drivers. So you will never notice good female drivers. So you don't notice anything in this category. Okay. And then in confirmation bias, oops, that's also confirmation. Where'd it go? Okay. Okay, so he's going to notice, so you notice bad drivers. Now, if you have the belief women are bad drivers, whenever you see, and I know you know people like this, I know you've seen this, they see someone doing something bad in traffic, it turns out to be a woman, they're like, yeah, see, I'm right, women are bad drivers. But then when someone in traffic does something, cuts them off or whatever, they look and it's not a female driver, they don't say anything and they forget about that, right? So that's how confirmation bias works. You just really remember those cases that prove you right, and you forget the cases that do not show that you're right. So bad non-women drivers and good female drivers are both things that would disprove his theory that he doesn't even notice or look. Okay, so let's talk about the belief that people die in groups of 3. Okay, so there are people out there, a lot of nurses and doctors think people die in groups of 3s. And then I've had other people say, no, ordinary people don't die in groups of 3. It's only famous people. But here it is. People just die, and we do the grouping. So people die, and you, in your mind, you put them into sets of 3. Suppose you believe that people die in groups of 4. In China, I believe the word 4 means death, and 4 is a bad number. So maybe in China, there's a belief people die in groups of 4. Well, that would be true too, because you would just group the people that die. People die every day. You just put them into sets of 4. And there you do the grouping. Okay, so here's famous people die in groups of 3. When I put this these PowerPoint slides together, I don't remember what year this was. Let me see. It doesn't say. A couple years ago. That year, Aretha Franklin, Kate Spade, and Anthony Bourdain died. And people say, wow, yeah, it's so true. People die in groups of 3. Okay, why is that confirmation bias? Because, well, what do you ask yourself? Okay, first of all, did you stop searching your memory about people that died in 2019? I think it's 2019. After you found 3. A lot of people do that. That's a biased search of memory. Just stop looking when you found 3. Let's see. So I looked up famous people who had died up to that point in 2019. This was only a small fraction. I just wrote some of them. But John McCain, Burt Reynolds, and Neil Simon also died that year. So that's 6. 2 groups of 3. And then why don't these guys count? Vic Damone, an old-timey singer. So why don't these guys count? And what counts as a famous person dying? Yeah. And if you just pick 3 out of here and said, oh, well, those are the only 3 that counts, that's sort of begging the question, which is another type of fallacy. Okay, next slide. Personality is pulled the other. So I feel this. Don't say anything, you will jinx it, even though I don't believe it. So here's some things people might say. It's been a long time since the baby has had a poop accident. Take he out. If you have a baby, then you'll be cringing. Here's this. I haven't been in a car accident since I was in high school. Ooh, I feel a little bit of cringe as I'm saying this. Okay, but why? Rationally, why would me saying this have anything to do, would cause me to get in a car accident? In the old days, maybe they had some explanation that the gods are listening, and you're being arrogant, and then the gods will step in. Gods, as in like the ancient deities, would step in and humble you. But I don't believe that the gods are like that. So so I haven't been in a car accident since I was in high school. Oh, your favorite team. You say, oh yeah, those Knights, they're on a winning spree. They're doing really well. They're going to go to the Stanley Cup. Oh my gosh. Knights fans might say, oh, shh, you're going to jinx it, or knock on wood. Whoa, gosh, say this to someone. Wow, you keep winning at poker. They say, oh, don't say anything, because you'll jinx it. I can't remember the last time we had a power outage. I haven't broken a bone in my whole life. Oh, boy. Okay, this one, and I say this to my students in person, and everybody groans. They said, how could you say such a thing? No one has ever drowned at the YMCA. Don't say it. Well, why would me saying this cause someone at a distant YMCA location to drown? It just couldn't happen. For those of you that struggle with insomnia, he hasn't had a bout of insomnia in a long time. She's been sleeping really well lately. Your insomnia is going away. Shh, don't say it, you'll jinx it. Okay, so if you feel me on this, I'll break it down into how this is believing in jinxing is a type of confirmation bias. Okay. So this is confirmation bias. You say something like, I've never broken a bone in my life. and then that bad things happen, and then that you break a bone within like that semester or a week or two, and you remember that connection because you primed yourself to remember the connection between that two. You saying something and the bad thing happening. So you see this like it's a false cause or a post hoc fallacy. Oh my gosh, I jinxed it. But here you go. You say these things all the time, and then the thing doesn't happen. This is a disconfirming instance. This is a confirming instance. I'm going to write confirming. Okay. The disconfirming instance is you say something like, I've never broken a bone in my life, and you don't break a bone. Well, are you going to remember that? No, you're not going to remember something not happening. Usually it doesn't work that way unless you have this rigorous scientific process set up that would make you record the thing you predicted happening and the thing you predicted not happening. Okay. Here, you don't say anything, you don't say something, and the bad thing happens. Well, you're not going to remember this disconforming case either. I'll highlight this. Disconfirming. Okay. You don't remember that disconfirming case either, when you don't say something and then the thing happens, okay? Because it's not remarkable. It doesn't fit the, that confirming instance.